Welcome to the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. I'm your host, Donald Grothoff, along with my wife, Gina. Our goal is to give voice to the hidden mind of obsessive-compulsive disorder, better known as OCD. In this podcast, we are interviewing yet another person dealing with OCD either professionally or personally. So stay with us for this impactful conversation. We would love to have your comments or to have you as a guest, or if you wish to tell your OCD or anxiety story, please visit us at invisiblewheelchair.com. So let's find out more about who we're interviewing today. Dr. DriAnahill is a clinical psychologist in private practice in Santa Barbara, California, where she provides therapy, high-performance coaching, and training to mental health professionals in ACT. She is a co-host of a popular podcast, Psychologists Off the Clock, which has over 1 million downloads, where she has interviewed leaders in the field of psychology, mindfulness, and wellness. She is a regular teacher of the Mindful Heart programs and Insight LA, and is passionate about integrative health, homesteading, and parenting with intention. She is co-author with Dr. Debbie Sorenson of ACT Daily Journal, How to Get Unstuck and Live Fully with Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. Learn more at drdianahill.com. Now, before we get to that interview, let's hear a word about our sponsor.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Q Sciences. Don and I discovered that the supplements we were taking and giving to our children were not being absorbed properly. I was very excited when I found Q Sciences. I was impressed with the quality of the products and that they provide maximum absorption. They have a variety of products, including a Q Max product, which is a combination of 3 products, including vitamins, minerals, and a probiotic. They also have hemp oil, a vitamin B12 spray, a sleep spray, and kids products. I've really seen a difference in how these products are improving how I feel, improving my mental health, and I'm happy with the quality of these products and how they're helping our whole family. If you'd like to learn more,
simply go to qsciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. That's the letter Q, sciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com, or visit invisiblewheelchair.com and find out more information there.
and stop throwing your money away on supplements that don't work and use a quality product like Q Sciences.
And now, on to the podcast. So Diana, I welcome you to the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm looking forward to us talking.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Don. I'm excited to talk with you all about acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT.
I'm looking forward to that too. What I like to start out with, I always ask my guests to kind of give a little personal story about yourself in any way you feel. I like to give my audience a different look on you, a different way of knowing you through a story of some sort. Could you do that for us?
Sure. I could tell the story about maybe how I live a values-rich life, how I've kind of created that for myself. And, I pursued a doctoral degree in a cognitive behavioral program at University of Colorado at Boulder. And my intention was really to explore evidence-based approaches for folks to help people, in particular around eating disorders. One of the things that happened for me along the way was I felt really out of alignment for myself in my own striving and in my own achievement-oriented goals. And I lost touch with what mattered most to me. And during my graduate year, my second year of graduate school, I actually withdrew from my program. There, when you get your Ph.D. in clinical psychology, it sort of takes a lot of time and energy to get there. And it took a lot of courage and willingness for me to say I was out of alignment. And I actually went and studied at a yoga ashram and thought I was going to be a yoga instructor.
Oh, wow.
And it was actually during that time that I discovered that I could turn towards a more aligned version of me that incorporated these principles of yoga and mindfulness and sort of values-rich living with evidence-based approaches like CBT. So when I went back to graduate school, I ended up pursuing research with Deborah Safer, who was at Stanford, in combination with my instructor, to research mindfulness-based interventions for eating disorders. And that sort of led me on the path, the journey to finding ACT. But it's been a journey all along the way, because over the course of my life, I can get caught up over and over again and finding myself out of alignment, like an instrument gets out of tune. And I have to take the time to tune back in and reorient to what matters most to me. And sometimes that takes a lot of courage. It takes bravery. It takes discomfort. It takes disappointing people. It takes, all sorts of scary thoughts that show up. It's been worth it in my life to do that.
What I look at that as is contrast. That you need to have that dip in the road, or that going off path for a little bit, to know that you're on the right path, or that you might need to change that path. So I look at, it's very important to have contrast in your life, to know what you really want. You got to know what you don't want.
Exactly.
And it sounds like you went through that in a pretty bold way. That's great. We're here really talking about ACT, the acceptance commitment therapy. Is that the correct? That's the correct way to say it. So I really would like to delve into it a little bit more and talk to my audience about what that is, how it works, how you work it.
Sure. Well, ACT at its core is a behavioral therapy, but it really incorporates acceptance-based strategies. And the goal of ACT is to help you live a rich and meaningful life, whatever that is to you. And it involves 6 core processes that help you build what's called psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility is your ability to open up and be present in your life, your ability to know what matters to you, what you care deeply about, and your ability to take committed action towards what matters to you, even as difficult thoughts show up, difficult sensations, urges, emotions, all the challenges that are part of being human. And that's psychological flexibility. And ACT teaches you these 6 core processes. They're sort of like, sometimes I think about it as sides of a Rubik's Cube. Okay. That together you kind of fiddle with to get yourself more aligned and directed towards a life that has meaning and purpose.
Oh, if it's Rubik's Cubes, that I can never figure those out. So
yeah. And actually, I use that metaphor on purpose because it's actually not about figuring it out.
Okay.
And why do kids have Rubik's Cubes, right? I have 2 boys and they love Rubik's Cubes. Sure, there's the figuring it out, but if you figure it out and make it perfect, then your Rubik's Cube just sits on your counter and you never want to touch it again because it's like, nobody touched the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
But it's the process, right? It's the process. It's the curiosity. It's the playfulness. It's the engagement. It's the moving from side to side, getting stuck on one side and saying, okay, I'll just move to the other side. I can be flexible here, right? Yeah. And it's really it's what we consider a process-based approach to living well, because it's not about outcomes. It's not about the perfect Rubik's Cube. It's about enjoying the process and engaging in the process of living.
Within ACT, I know you, and I've done podcasts on this before, and they talk a lot about dealing with bringing values, your own personal values into it. And I'm just kind of curious about, can you tell us a little bit more about how values play into ACT and how important they are?
Sure. So if we go back to that Rubik's Cube model, we're moving to one side, which is the value side. And there's 6 of them. So hopefully we can play around with them today. But the values part of ACT is really important. And it's particularly important for something like anxiety, because the values are the why behind you being willing to approach scary things, or being willing to open up to allowing difficult thoughts to be there, or willing to do something like exposure. Values are really at their core, they're personal and chosen. Sometimes I talk to people about values being like favorite colors. Your favorite color may be blue, and my favorite color may be red, and blue is not better than red. So they're different than morals or shoulds. Really what they are is qualities of action that you bring into your life, into the different domains of your life. So for example, you may have the domain of parenting. And if we're going to look at the values behind parenting, I would ask you questions like, how do you want to be as a parent? If I were to follow you around with a video camera all day long and say, wow, that person's really aligned with being a compassionate parent or being a mindful parent or being a playful parent, what would you be doing? Like those are the qualities of action, the verbs and the adverbs that you bring into your living. So values are alive, values are actions, and they are not shoulds, rules, morals, or to-dos.
Because you talked about the psychological flexibility.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the 6 on the core?
Psychological flexibility would be the whole Rubik's Cube.
Okay.
Your ability to move around these different core processes to build psychological flexibility, which is your ability to stay aligned with your values or realign with your values, act in ways that you want to be in the world, even when difficult thoughts, feelings, sensations, urges, life circumstances show up. So I'll concretize it a little bit because I think it's helpful with examples. Sometimes we get kind of heady in ACT, and it's better to like give an example. An example for me, maybe sometimes I can get frustrated and irritable with my partner. Just sometimes, right?
Sometimes.
And we'll be in the kitchen, and it's usually after a long day, both of us are exhausted, right? Our resources are low and we have too much to deal with, in the end of the day. And I'll have irritability show up. Or maybe we'll be engaged in some kind of conflict, right? I'll have anger show up. Mm-hmm. With psychological flexibility, I'd be able to use my core processes of opening up and allowing that to be like, here's my irritability, here's my anger, I'm noticing it in my body, while still being engaged in my values of maybe listening to my partner as opposed to generating my own thoughts of how I'm going to respond without listening to him, which is usually the case. So I actually can pause and listen to him, even when I have the buts and the what ifs in my head that want to counter everything he's saying. Maybe it's being warm and kind, even when I feel anger inside. Or maybe it's something as actually what can be really hard in a conflict, like reach out and put my hand on his shoulder and lean towards the thing that I care about. Right? Or take perspective. He has a different perspective than I do. Can I get behind his eyes? And what is it like to be him right now? Those are the core processes that help me be more psychologically flexible, which means being the type of partner that I want to be in that moment. And it's not easy to do, but we can practice these skills and we can learn them in our daily lives with practice. And it lends to feeling more satisfied in your life when you engage in the ways that are how you want to be in the world.
You talked about the 6 core parts of the ACT. Can we talk a little bit more about what those 6 cores are?
Sure. Well, in that example, I kind of mentioned some of them. So values are, how do I want to be in this situation? What do I care about? What matters to me? That's one of them. Another one of the 6 core processes is acceptance. And that's the acceptance and commitment therapy part of it, right? So ACT is more of an acceptance-based approach. Now, oftentimes when we say things, when we use the word acceptance, when I work with clients, they're like, I do not want to accept, I don't want to accept this. This is horrible, right? And I will shift the words to being more around willingness. Like, are you willing to feel? Are you willing to have that thought? Because oftentimes it's our non-acceptance of life. It's our attempts to control what's happening under our skin that leads to a lot of our suffering. So something like OCD is a perfect example of that, right? So you have a difficult urge or image or sensation or thought that shows up. Try and neutralize it. Do this behavior to get rid of it, right? Or think this thought to get rid of it, or engage in this compulsion. But what that does is actually leads to more of that very thing that you don't want to have. So the skill of acceptance in that example with my partner would be, can I open up and allow this sensation of irritability in my body? Where is it in my body? Is it in my chest? What color is it? If I were to outline it, what would the outline of it be? Can I make space for it? And still, while I'm engaging with my partner, with this being here. So that's acceptance, which is a second one. A third one has to do with thoughts, and ACT takes a different approach to thoughts than traditional cognitive behavioral therapies. ACT doesn't dispute thoughts. ACT doesn't try and change thoughts. ACT doesn't try to replace thoughts. but rather very similar to the acceptance strategy, ACT gives you a little bit of space between you and your thoughts. So I'll do an example with you, Don, because I think it's good to kind of physicalize this.
Do I have to do something?
You're going to have to do something.
Okay.
You're going to take action here towards maybe your values of helping your listeners. So I want you to think about, so is there any thought that gets in the way of you being an effective podcaster, or gets in the way of you being how you want to be in the world?
One thought? Is that all?
We'll just first go play with one, but I know there's a million, but what would be an example?
Like, for me, the financial thought is a lot of times one that blocks a lot of things, and podcasting one of them, being able to like get the equipment I need, or, I'm slowly building it, but I want it all now,
Yeah. So would the thought be like, I'm not making enough money, or I don't have enough money? Yeah. Okay. So I would want you to imagine that you have that thought, I'm not making enough money, and imagine it on the palm of your hand. Okay. And then I'd like for you to take that thought and put it right up in front of your face, right over your eyes, really, really, really close up. And when you have that thought, I'm not making enough money, how well can you engage with me on this podcast? How well can you see me?
Not very well.
Not very well.
Not at all, really.
Yeah. And how well can you actually see the thought that would have been written on your hand when it's this close up to your face?
It just becomes a little blurred.
Blurry. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I want you to move your hand slowly away from your face. How well can you see me and engage with me on the podcast when you have this thought on your hand?
Very well. It's not bothering me now. It's just over there.
It's over there. And could you look at it if you needed to, like I'm not making enough money thought? Because you may need to work on that at some point. Like it may be helpful to make some money off this podcast.
You think I need to? I agree with that.
You may choose to. I won't actually say need to. You may choose to.
Choose to. Yeah.
Yeah. So you may choose to turn your head to look at that thought sometimes, because sometimes it may be helpful thought. But notice what I did there is I didn't cut off your hand. I didn't strap your hand behind your back. I didn't write a different thought on your hand. We just got a little bit of space from it. Okay. And oftentimes what happens is we are so entangled in our thoughts that we walk around with our hands in front of our face, or we spend so much time trying to like rewrite our thought or get rid of our thought or cut off our hand or, do all these things. Yeah. Scratch it out. Do this thing over here to distract me from this thing. Yeah. Really, with cognitive diffusion, which is one of those 6 sides of that Rubik's Cube, with cognitive diffusion, what we're doing is just getting a little bit of space and seeing that I am not this thought. And this thought doesn't have to drive my behavior. I can engage with Diana Hill on this podcast, even with that thought in the back of my head of this podcast doesn't make me any money. And then I can use my other hand to do other things, like maybe make some money if I want, or, engage in other things. So that's an example of one of those 6 core processes, cognitive diffusion. And you can see how this would be incredibly helpful with something like an anxious thought, or incredibly helpful with the I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough, I am not enough thoughts, which are in my head a lot.
Yeah. Did we cover all 6 of the core processes?
We've only done 3.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's...
we got more.
Okay, good.
But that is good.
Do I get to experiment some more with some of these other ones too?
Are you having fun with that?
Yeah, role play, love role playing,
Yeah. Yeah, let's do some more.
All right.
Let's do perspective taking. Okay. Because perspective taking, going back to that example of the fight with my partner.
Okay.
One of the most helpful things in life is to be able to take perspective on the stories that we have about ourselves. Notice when we're caught in a self-story, and notice how our self-story can really narrow our experience. So examples of self-stories are anything that begins with, or some things that begin with the words I am, I always, I never, I can't, right? And oftentimes these self-stories we develop as children, or we develop at some point in our lives, and then we just adopt them and they become the way in which we view ourselves in the world. Or maybe we adopt them in the part, like in my relationship, like I always empty the dishwasher, right?
Yeah.
I am always doing blah, blah, blah. And what happens is that we get these rigid views about ourselves. We seek confirmatory evidence to support them. And it really limits our flexibility in our life, right? So if like, I'm never good at math, we may learn that when we're in 8th grade, and we carry it all the way until we're 48 years old, and we choose things that don't have math in them. Oh, I'm not going to do that because it has math in it. Or I'm not going to do that because it has writing in it. Here's something simple that you could do with a self-story, Dawn. So do you have an I always, I never, I am not, I am? And it can be positive or negative. It doesn't have to be, because positive ones are just as dangerous. I can tell you why, but about yourself.
That's one of the words top words I talk about is always and never are really dangerous in a way, you know. Well, yeah, I mean, like with my partner, my wife, I feel like I'm always the one cleaning the house.
Perfect. I'm always the one cleaning the house. You could imagine, and you could actually do this. I'll simplify it and say, like, I'm always cleaning. Okay. I'm always cleaning. I'm always cleaning. Yeah. If you were to write that down on a piece of paper, I am always cleaning. Go ahead and write it down. Right. And our listeners could write down an I'm always one too. And it could be like, I am shy, or I am anxious. I'm always anxious, or I'm always depressed. Okay. I'm always cleaning. Yeah. Okay. And you can imagine how that I'm always cleaning story kind of could shape your world, right? So what I want you to do is can you think about a time when you're not cleaning the house?
Well, when I'm sleeping,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like one toe tends to move around a lot, so I don't know if it's doing some cleaning while I'm sleeping.
Yeah. No. How about right now? Are you cleaning the house?
No.
Okay. So I want you to do something with this sentence. I just want you to put a comma after that sentence and write the word sometimes. I'm always cleaning the house sometimes. So we're getting a little bit of flexibility here. Like our self-story isn't always true. I'm bad at math sometimes. I'm a good student sometimes. Those positive self-stories are just as dangerous because we can get in positive self-esteem traps. And then those can cause problems. We put ourselves up in a pedestal and then we fall hard when we don't meet those expectations. Right?
Yeah.
Then what I want you to do is I want you to take your pen and I want you to circle the words I am. Just go ahead and circle the words I am.
Okay.
That is the only constant here. Perspective on our self-stories is recognizing that we are more than the stories our mind tells us about who we are. And there's contextual factors. There's context. Sometimes I'm cleaning the house. Sometimes I'm not. How helpful is it in my relationship to be in this self-story? How does it block, things? Yeah.
Well, it gives me a superiority kind of complex in a way, or, makes me feel more powerful or something,
Yeah.
There's a lot of detriment to it.
Yeah. And there's a flip side to that story. I'm always cleaning means you're always
not cleaning.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then all of a sudden, maybe some of our values around like teamwork or working together, or that we are an ecosystem in this family, get lost because we're not in a we're in an I versus you. And we can blow that up, outside of the household to things like politics, world's problems, right? Yeah. Me versus you. So with perspective taking, or in the book that Debbie Sorenson and I wrote called Act Daily Journal, what we work on in that chapter of perspective taking is being able to get a little wiggle room from your self stories, being able to step into more of what's called a transcendent self, the I am self, that is changing over time, but also is sort of like the sky. Like I am, there's just a me that can hold it all, that I am more than my self stories. That can be incredibly helpful just in our relationships with ourselves, but also in the flexibility of our behavior, because self stories really box us in and can also impact our relationships. So that's the fourth one. We're moving through the Rubik's Cube. We've done the red, the green, the yellow.
I'm turning it. I'm trying.
You're turning it. Okay. So we're going to flip sides. This will be a simple one, but the ACT approach on this one is a little bit different, which is being present.
Okay.
Being present. Go back to the fight with my partner. Gosh, the very, very most important thing in that moment is to get present. Get out of my head. Get into the present moment, see it with beginner's mind, not the story that I came, not the thoughts that are, pulling me away, not the sensations that are overwhelming me, but just being present, pausing. And in ACT, a lot of us are learning about mindfulness and the benefits of mindfulness in terms of being able to help us with behavior change and feel more satisfied in our lives. With ACT, the angle that Debbie and I take is be present where it matters most. Because it's hard to be present all of the time. We're all going to be distracted at times. There's just going to be moments in our life where we want to check out or we want to let our mind wander, and that's fine. But when my kid comes to me with his Lego set to show me, Mommy, look what I made, and I'm on my phone, this is a moment. It's an important moment for me to put the phone down, look him in the eyes, and be present. Why? Because it's connected to something that matters to me. It connects to loving my kid and wanting him to have the feeling that he's more important than what's in my phone. It also connects to modeling behavior to him that I hope at some point he will do for me. When he's 14, he better put his phone down and look me in the eyes. And it also connects to just feeling more satisfied and engaged in my life. Being present is one of those 6 core processes. And it's really helpful for all the other ones, right? So this is where the Rubik's Cube starts to show up. Like if I'm present, then I'm able to better pay attention to my thoughts that I'm entangled in and, reorienting towards my values. So that's one of them. And then I think we're on our 6th one. We've done values.
I can count them.
Yeah. Cognitive diffusion.
Yeah.
Acceptance. Perspective taking, being present. And then the 6th one is committed action. Committed action is using the behavior science of psychology that we have decades of research on to help us actually take the step, take action, move, do the thing. And in that chapter that Debbie and I walk you through, we do everything from looking at the basics of behavior science, like there's a cue, there's a behavior, and there's a reward. How do you set up your life so that you're starting to reward the behaviors that you want to engage in, and you reward them with your values? How are you setting up your life so that there's cues and contexts that support what you want to do? So for example, when I put my socks on in the morning, I balance on one foot and I put my sock on, and then I balance on the other foot and I put my sock on. And why do I do that? Because I'm going to put my socks on most days, and it connects to a value of mine of practicing my balance. I'm a yoga teacher. I care about balance. I also see how balance impacts our aging later on. And if I do that little tiny practice of balancing on one foot and balancing on the other foot every single day, by the time I'm 80 years old, I'm going to have really great balance. And it helps with my mobility. So things like that, where you start to build into your daily life little committed actions that align. Someone else's values may not be around balance and bodies, right? But someone else may be, I really care about writing every day, or I want to engage in more gardening, or I want to engage in more art, or I want to work on this other project, that we can create our life or build our lives around our values and the things that we care about with committed action.
My wife and I work together, and we really work with parents. And, one of the things we talk about is that the things you set up now are, how you parent your child and how you, use values with your child are going to come back to you later on when the parent-child paradigm switches, and you're then you're the child now, but when you become the parent, how are your kids going to treat you? They're going to treat you the way you've developed, your relationship with them.
Yeah. And I think that lends to psychological flexibility and how it doesn't just benefit you, it benefits others. Yeah. And that was really the last chapter of our book, was looking at this on a grander scale. How when you develop psychological flexibility in your life, it spreads. And it spreads good things. It helps you be able to engage in more pro-social action in your life, like thinking about the bigger whole and how you impact the world around you. But it spreads even during COVID, when they looked at parents that were more psychologically flexible during COVID. They saw less spillover effects of stress onto kids. They saw less marital discord in families, and they saw better parenting practices and also less stress and anxiety in the children. And I know that from my own household, I use the word ecosystems, and I really believe in ecosystems. I'm a homesteader. So I beekeep, and I have a garden, and we have chickens, and we, grow a lot of our own food, because I see it all as interconnected. In growing my food and beekeeping, not only am I educating my kids, I'm also engaging in movement, I'm engaging in nature, I'm engaging in my values, and I'm also contributing to the greater whole. So when we start to see ourselves as psychologically flexible, we can start to engage in the world in a way that has a deeper sense of meaning and a bigger impact than just ourselves.
And that's something we need, because I think we've become disconnected from that as a society, I think, and so coming back to that would be vital. So.
Yeah, we silo ourselves, and we silo ourselves because we're avoiding. Yeah, we're avoiding all that hard stuff. It's part of living.
Yeah. So you've talked a little bit about your new book, the ACT Daily Journal, and I thought maybe we talk a little bit more, like what made you decide to put all this into a book? What really kind of a little bit more about what the book is about?
Well, it's co-authored with Debbie Sorenson, who was my friend first and my podcast co-host second. And then we wrote a book together. We're both ACT practitioners. So we both have practices that we've been doing this methodology for over a decade. And then we also use it in our own lives as moms, as, partners, as just humans on this planet. And ACT is a profound approach in psychology that's really revolutionizing the field of psychology. The research on ACT is just like out of control. There's 400 randomized controlled trials. There's meta-analyses. There's meta-analyses of meta-analyses. It's just skyrocketing. And at the same time, there isn't a lot of ACT being disseminated or used in a clear way to the general public. So we wanted to get this in the hands of people that maybe aren't in the therapy room, or people that are in the therapy room but don't have access to an ACT therapist, and just in the hands of regular everyday folk that want to put these principles that are really showing up as the key components of psychological flourishing into practice. And traditionally, ACT sometimes is hard to get our heads around, right? Yeah. So the way that we do it is going through systematically each one of these processes, and you do it over 8 weeks. And it starts all the chapters or all the weeks have stories, because I really believe in, as you opened today, Dawn, I really appreciated that. I believe in storytelling as a great way to communicate. So we talk through story about how we use these in our daily life. We give examples and we give practices and journal prompts. And the reason why we do that is that you're learning ACT by doing ACT in your life today. Each day takes like 5 to 10 minutes to complete. But over the course of time, you're building a skill set that is alive and real for you. So it's an 8-week program that I feel really good about. And my values behind doing this work is helping people be able to have access to something that could really help their lives open up and feel more meaningful.
And then, of course, you do a podcast, too, with yourself and Dr. Sorenson and Dr. Sauter.
Yes, and Yael Shambran. We're 4 clinical psychologists that offer a podcast. We interview folks and talk about topics in psychology that are related to flourishing in your life, work, home, all over the place. And I also do a lot of other offerings. So I offer a lot of workshops for the general public on ACT. And at my website at drdianahill.com/events, or just go to my website, you'll see that over the course of the next year, I'm offering really low cost. I donate all my proceeds, but really low cost workshops through Inside LA on acceptance and commitment therapy. I also offer a lot of teachings through my blog, and then I'm teaching a lot through Instagram, of all places. Wow. Just as sort of a place to be able to, I really want to insert good content into a world that people go to and feel really dissatisfied. So I'm sort of like joining with joining with that which I was very resistant to in the service of wanting to share these ideas. And I give pictures from my homestead, but also strategies from ACT that take just a couple minutes that you can learn along the way. So check me out at Dr. Diana Hill on Instagram.
Okay, well, and I'll remind my audience, I'll have that up on the invisiblewheelchair.com website when this goes up. So if you can't beat them, join them, right? It's that.
Yeah, it's about turning towards. I resisted being on social media until 6-8 months ago. I wrote a book, and my publisher was strong about me being on social media, I was probably the only 40-something-year-old on the planet that wasn't ever on Facebook or Instagram. And actually took a look at that, of what is that about for me? And it had a lot to do with my own anxiety and fear around how I would engage with it, and that may be unhealthy for me. And then also not wanting to perpetuate comparison, some of the things that I see with my clients that they really struggle with in social media. And so as an ACT practitioner, I sort of applied my own psychological flexibility skills to this problem. And what I said is, okay, how can I open up and allow the discomfort of doing this thing? It's uncomfortable for me to do, in the service of my values of sharing this important work. And so now I'm in it, and I'm actually kind of enjoying it. I do have some, ways in which I confine it so that it's still healthy for me. But I think that we put a lot of blocks on ourselves and in our lives that it's helpful from time to time to take a look at and see if they're serving us. Yeah.
We should be doing it on a kind of a regular basis, really. Diane, this has been wonderful. I love your explanations. I love the examples you gave, and we got a chance to really play it out, because I think that helps to understand ACT so much better, to be able to give real examples. You took me through some things that helped me to see it better too. So I really am so thankful that you were on today and did this explanation like you did. You did a great job doing it. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Don. It's a delight to be in your presence, and I appreciate you taking your time, unpaid, to do this work.
But this hand, I'm going to start working with this hand to get that payment going. So.
And then maybe we could also look and see that maybe we're getting paid in other ways.
Yes. This concludes this podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Remember that we love comments. We also would love for you to be our guest or to tell your story. Simply go to invisiblewheelchair.com. Gina and I want you to know that there is hope for those who suffer with OCD, and that it is manageable. And we are here to help you and your family. To find out more about our practice and what we can do for you, go to focusedhealthyfamily.com. Opinions and ideas expressed here are not necessarily those of Focused Healthy Family, Family OCD, Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, or the Grothoffs. Thank you for listening. Keep tapping and focusing forward in your journey.